Let's look at the second part of Chapter 10. We're going to look at a new tense now called the Passé simple. And it means the simple past, and it's simple in the sense that it's just one word. It's not composed out of two words like the Passé composé. So this is the one word past tense. Now, the first thing you need to know about this is that this is a literary tense. It's only used in writing. People don't use it in speaking. But that doesn't mean that people don't know it. Even kids know it, because when you were to read a bedtime story to your kids, it might very well be written in the passé simple because that's the way that French is written. Now, when you translate it, there's only one translation. It can't be both the past definite and the past perfect, like the passé composé can be. So if we have the je trouve, so that's the verb trouver with the er, and then the first person singular has the ai ending. It's I found. It's not I was finding. It's not I have found. It's not those other past tenses. It's just I found. And typically, it's used in historical narratives where you're telling the story or telling what happened, one thing after another, because we've got other past tenses too that we will see. So let's look at how we form the passé simple, and we're going to use parler as our paradigm. Je parlais is I spoke, so it's got an AI ending. Tu parlas, AS. Il parla, or the A ending. He spoke. So we've got these two are pronounced the same, you spoke and he spoke, but they're spelled differently. Je parlais is pronounced differently. Now in the plural, we've got some new endings. Nous parlâmes, we spoke. Vous parlâtes, you spoke. So this is a vous without an EZ or a nous without an ONS. And then for the passé simple of parler with il, plural, it's ils parlèrent. They spoke. Now we've got an ending that begins with er, and it's pronounced, so we put the accent mark there, but the ent is still silent, typical of a third person verb. So ils parlèrent. So this ending is pronounced er. Only the first e is pronounced. So that's for the er verbs. The ir verbs and the re verbs have different endings. And I've got two columns here. Some verbs end in this theme that have lots of i's. Some end in this theme that have a lot of u. But it's not necessarily ir verbs here and re verbs here. Sometimes they go back and forth. So it's just these are sets of endings, and you have to learn which ones they have. So for the I endings, it's im, eat, ear. So very similar to what we saw for the er verbs with a's, except for the first one. Then we've got the ut, and ur for these endings that end in r. Notice we've got the circumflexes on all the first and second person plural, and that's a good sign that you're dealing with the passé simple. So how would this work? Let's choose finir, our regular ir verb. The passé simple would be il finit, he finished. Now wait a minute, you might say. That's the same thing as the present tense. Yeah, that's how it goes for the present tense of the IR and some regular IR verbs and some other irregular verbs. It's the same form, but you have to know by the context on whether it is past or present. And it's the same thing because we have I read and I read. They're spelled the same, but you just need to know by context if it's a present or past tense. So it works out pretty well. Vendre is ils vendirent, they sold. So notice how vendre is an RE verb. It doesn't necessarily have the U endings. It actually has the IR endings. Ils vendirent, they sold. Now, there are some irregular passé simple verbs where the stem changes to things we haven't necessarily seen before. And so like for recevoir, il reçut is he received. Connaître, il connut, he knew. Courir, il courut, he ran. Croire, il crut, he believed. Now notice all these stems, they look an awful lot like the past participles, but with just kind of like an extra T on it. And so that's kind of nice that the past participle and the passé simple stem are generally the same for most verbs. Conclure, il conclut, he concluded. Pouvoir, remember the past participle is pu, pu. Il put was he was able to, or he could. Savoir is il sut, he knew. And dire, il dit, he said. But notice that il dit is also how the present tense of dire, he says. So you got to be careful based on context. Is that going to be the passé simple or the past, the present tense? Now there's a few irregular passé simple verbs that even have endings that are different. Venir and tenir, they go together. Il vint, that's not, int is not a normal passé simple ending, but that's how venir and tenir end. So il vint is he came, il tint is he held, because tenir is to hold. Then être, faire, and avoir, the three most common verbs, are also irregular. Être is il fut, he was. Now, faire is really similar, il fit. And so you've got to be really careful not to get être and faire confused in the passé simple. Être has the u endings, and faire has the I ending. So you will probably want to make a flashcard for these so that you can won't get them confused. And use the third person singular since that's the most common. For avoir, the passé simple is il eut. Remember, EU is the past participle of avoir, and we just add a T to it. So that would be he had. So these five are going to mess you up if you don't recognize them because they're just so different than the other passé simple verbs. So I would encourage you to memorize them. So here's some exercise. Write down your answers, and when you're done, you can go on to the next video.